Hey guys, welcome back with another video. In today's video, we are going to talk about the complete CI/CD pipeline from the scratch. If you're new on this journey as a DevOps engineer or you haven't started anything, please watch till the end because you will get a lot of information and a lot of understanding how pipeline works. So in this video, we are going to use a GitHub Actions for our CI pipeline, and for continuous deployment, we are using a ArgoCD. And for basically, we are using our Python application, which is written in a Flex framework. We are going to deploy in a Kubernetes cluster with a GitOps approach. So that means we have a lot of things that needs to be covered here, and I will start from the beginning, like how this application is working. Right, we will use locally. How first we will basically try to test this application in a local environment. If that will work, then we will containerize the application, and then we will create a pipelines for automation. So this video will be covering everything that you needed, and you can also integrate more tools in the continuous integrity pipelines, but the main objective is to understand how things work in a real world. Okay, so what this architecture, if you able to understand a little bit, maybe you already have some experience, but if you don't have any experience, that is fine, because still I'm going to cover it. But please do not skip this video. I will try to explain each and everything, but if you still have some doubts after while creating your own projects after watching this video, you can comment below and I will try to answer those questions within a 1 or 2 hours. So let's understand this process again. So suppose a developer created an application and he's doing the changes. So his mentality or his main objective is, whenever he's doing the changes, it will automatically deploy in the cluster. So how he can achieve that things, because developer is creating his own laptop, but when he needs to deploy on cluster or any infrastructure, he need a continuous deployment in a fast delivery. So he's thinking that whenever I'm doing changes, suppose the current version of the application is v1, suppose, right? He did some changes and he created another project, let's say v2. Okay, so whenever he's doing the changes and he's pushing to the GitHub, for example, I'm using GitHub, then this GitHub action pipeline will triggered that there is a new changes in the master branch or main branch, whatever the branch name is. I'm using master, so I'm saying master branch. So whenever there is changes in the main branch or master branch, this pipeline will trigger, and this GitHub action pipeline will automatically test the application whether they have some kind of syntax related error, or code quality checks, or other test also. Okay, then if it gets successfully passed, all the things are fine, then automatically that application will be containerized and it will build the image, and it automatically push to the Docker Hub with a new tag. So suppose he created a new application, right? He did some changes, of course, and previously the version of the image is like, let's say demo app v1. Okay, next time when he did the changes, then next time it should go directly demo app v2, like this. So whenever there is a new changes, it automatically tag with a new name. And it also, this pipeline, this GitHub action pipeline, we also going to update the manifest file, Kubernetes manifest files, with a new tag. So suppose we have already the like a deployment files, YAML files, manifest files, and the services other files. So that is a basically GitOps approach. So what is a GitOps approach? That GitOps approach is a similar way like DevOps methodology and DevOps practice. Basically, like developer is maintaining his entire source code into the GitHub, right? Similar way, the infrastructure code DevOps engineer will maintain into the GitHub. Okay, so he have a better version controlling, means he can roll out or roll back with the new version or previous version with the help of GitHub, also Git. And also with this GitOps approach, it will be very easy to deploy into the cluster directly. So when we have the manifest file as we written, and then when we are doing the new changes with the help of action, GitHub Actions, the manifest file will be updated. And when this will be updated, ArgoCD, we are using ArgoCD for continuous deployment, CD. So ArgoCD will automatically look for the new changes into the GitHub action, sorry, in the manifest file, and it will sync and roll out the new version into the Kubernetes cluster. So this is the entire workflow we will use, and we will create each and everything. And for the Kubernetes cluster, we are going to use a mini cube. One more thing, many people have a lot of concern about how we can create a DevOps project in our local machines, right? Why we do not have we don't want to go to the cloud because of just pricing, and like sometime it required to create a lot of instances which create a billing, right? Also, but it is a good thing if you can practice, but if you don't practice, then you can still follow this, because what we will do as this project is basically a totally free. So GitHub Action, why we are using GitHub Action, we can also use a Jenkins for creating our pipelines for doing all these things. But we created a GitHub because there is a two reason. First, you don't need to maintain any VMs to, you don't have to maintain your worker node or master node for the Jenkins, right? We are doing that in GitHub is already providing our free instances, means free runners. They are providing a free runners where we can run our jobs in free. So whenever jobs will be triggered and completed, GitHub automatically destroyed that VMs. Another reason why we are using is because this in Jenkins, most of the people are not very familiar with the syntax of that Groovy language, right? So in Jenkins we are using Groovy language, but in GitHub Action you are using a YAML syntax. So if you're already familiar with the Kubernetes, writing a manifest file in a Kubernetes, you can easily understand how to write a YAML file for the pipeline also. So this is a two reason I am using this GitHub Actions. And this another one more example why we are using it. Suppose in Jenkins, if you're running your app, basically pipeline, right? Your Jenkins should be running stage. If your master node of the Jenkins is not running, then your pipeline will not trigger, right? But in GitHub Action, you don't have to maintain anything, right? Whenever their jobs will be triggered, it will automatically use the GitHub runners, and it will automatically destroy that. So there is a lot of benefits for using it, and it's also like in a trend, like in the market value, companies also asking, do you know about the GitHub Actions? So there is a reasons. Another thing, we are using Kubernetes mini queue for the Kubernetes, and we will install in our laptop, so we don't have to go to any EC2 instances for doing these things. Okay. Another thing, you don't have to write from the scratch this application. Okay, because I already will give you the link in a description about this entire project, and this is publicly available. Please, if you are interested, please do a start and also do the fork if you are interested, which that will basically, if you start this thing, you will get updated whenever I'm doing some changes in the repo also. So in this repo we have the entire project. Okay, so we have basically the application, which is apps, and we have also the readme, which you can read all the instructions which I already wrote here. Okay, and then you also have the deploy, which basically a manifest files. Now usually the manifest file that you are writing for ArgoCD for like a GitOps approach, GitOps approach is basically the manifest file should be a different folder, different repo, instead of the same which developer is maintaining it. The reason is it will be a more flexibility, and like it will be a more right way. But for me, because this is my development environment, it does not for the corporate, right? So I can use this one, and I have a lot of another repo also that I do not want to conflict it. So for now we can create inside that in our project, so that we can also refer as this is an entire project. Okay, then we also have the templates and index. I will cover about this later on when I will explain the project. Now what you will learn with this thing, you will learn about the git commands, you will learn you will have, you can use whatever the VS code editor, whatever the IDE you want to do that. You will learn about the docker commands, how to create a docker files and containerize the application. Then you will also learn about how to use a minikube commands and how to install minikubes. You will see GitHub and GitHub Actions. For ArgoCD, you will learn about how to deploy the pipeline for ArgoCD, and also you will able to learn about the Flex application. So how to create this is very important thing. So after watching this video, not only you will able to deal with this application, but any Flex application, any Python based application, you will able to deal it. Okay, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time more, but I will start from the beginning, like explaining the source code, how this application is working locally. Then we will containerize this application, and later on we will see. So before starting this video, make sure you have to understand what is a DevOps mentality when DevOps engineer is writing a pipeline, what they are thinking, and what they have a right approach, right? So if you follow this thing, you probably able to understand, and you will deal with any projects, right? And you will able to create any pipeline. So let's understand. This is me as I'm creating project. So this is me. Whenever I'm creating any project, I used to first understand, and if I don't know the project based, basically suppose this is a Python based application, right? This is a Flex application, Python. So if I already know that, right, if I already know that how Python application basically working, then I will not go to the developer. But if this is a like different based application, like this is a Mon stack application or another based, I mean whatever the another architecture, another programming languages, if I don't know what I have to follow, I will sit down with the developer who write down the code, and I will understand how this application is working. Uh, right, what is the requirements to run that application, so with the help of developer, I will able to understand what is a dependency, how this application is exposing the ports, and how developer is executing all the tasks in their local environment to run this application for testing purpose, right? So first I will follow this thing if I don't know. If you already know that architecture, what is a Python application, if Python application, I will test in my local environment. Suppose I already know this is a Python application, so my first role is to test this application in local environment. Test the local environment. If that will work, my application is working fine. If it is fine, then I will containerize this application. Containerized the application. After containerize the application, like I containerize the application, okay, then later on I will do all the step. I will record all my step that I did on my local machine. Record the steps, and then I will create a pipeline instructions. This is a pipeline file. Okay, whether it can be a Jenkins, whether it can be a GitHub, whether it can be a Circle AI. So it does not matter for me, because sorry for the bad handwriting, because I'm using a first time this whiteboard. Okay, but you have to understand this thing very. This is not like you just start writing a YAML files and you start writing a pipelines. It is not a right way. Suppose if the application is not working locally, it will not work in your pipelines also, right? So first try in a local environment, then you can basically deal with that. So all right, let's start with understanding about how this application is working. So I'm going to start with the basic understanding. One second. Okay, so this is a very basic application written in the Flex framework. And what this application is, if I run this application locally, okay, so you will have the instruction in the README file also. If I go back here, right, I already pasted everything, so you don't have to worry. So if you have to test this application locally, you can simply clone that, and then you can just run that install all the dependency of the application. I will cover about what is a dependency and how to install it. Okay, then run this application locally. So I will copy this command and simply paste this thing. Okay, now it start running this application on port number 5000. And if I go back to my browser, let's copy and run this thing. All right, so you see this basically this application is basically giving you the weather of your current weather. So if I type daily, it will give me the temperature and other things, right? So this is a very minimalistic application which has, and this is a 2-tier application. Now what is a 2-tier application? Let me explain again. So what is a 2-tier or 3-tier application? So there is a static application where you have only HTML, CSS, for example, JavaScript. Means there is nothing but just a front end. Okay, these everything is under the front end. Then there is a 2-tier application. In 2-tier application, you will have everything front end. You also have front end, and you have backend also. In similar example, if this application I'm putting any city name, right? I am putting Delhi here. Whenever I'm clicking on this get weather, it is something is happening. It is pulling up some data from the some, maybe it's calling the API, right? I will explain that thing. But what is happening? It is giving me some data, right? It is some doing the processing. So whenever there is some activities or doing something, right, that is basically backend processing using a backend programming language for processing. It can be API calls. So that is a backend. But this is a 2-tier application. If I have to create a 3-tier application, 3-tier application has everything: front end, back end, and databases. Okay, now for example, here we got the details like temperature, weather, and humidity. Now if I have to create this same application for 3-tier application, what I can do, I can store this value into the databases, right? And I can also put some feature like, do you want to get this previous weather which you have checked with the help of some trigger, right, event triggered, that will develop as a 3-tier applications. So if that introduce a databases here, right, if it introduce a databases, then it becomes a 3-tier application. So this application, for this specific application, this is a 2-tier application. So let's understand, we don't have to learn a lot about this. Okay, so let's understand about this application. First of all, I already integrated my API, which is not a good practice for creating an application, but this is just for we are using a open weather API basically to call the API, and this will give you the weather. Okay, but in production or in real time, I mean whenever you are creating an application, this is a not right practice to integrate your APIs into the projects. The reason is, if you get the API, you can trigger, you can call the anything, right? You can basically play with the API, and you can play with my API also from here, because this project is available on. But the thing is, this API does not have a lot of features, like it only has the retrieve features. So that's why I integrated. But if this API can also like update the values or do a lot of things, then it is not a right practice. Okay. Then later on, you have the application, which is a main application. So this is a Flex based application. If you see, we used from Flex, import Flex. So we are importing the Flex module, and also we are importing the render template for front end and back end. So if you have the front end, sorry, only the front end. If you have a index.html, which is a main file, and if you have to integrate with your backend processing, you can use a render templates. Then you also have a request, which we imported for get and post requests. And then we have the basic function, which is doing this calling functions. Okay, so if request is a post request, means if somebody is putting the details here, for example, I'm putting daily, Whenever I'm clicking in this is a post request. Post request is basically, let me clear this thing. What is a get? What is a get and post? So get is basically when you want to retrieve from the server. Okay, you are getting something. Okay, post is whenever you want to send the request to the server. For example, you are filling up some form, then you are doing the post request with the form you are filling up, and then you are getting some result, that is a get request. Okay, so this is the meaning of get and post. Now basically I'm saying if the request is a post, then ask for the city, what is the city name, and then in a response do a request.get, which is I'm using, and then this is a string, basically like a base URL, then I'm using a city and replacing with my key, and then like this. Okay, then I'm saying if the status is 200, then return the values. If the response is not 200, then print the message city not found. Okay, and then return with the help of index.html, and index.html have the front end application like you see here, right? Like developed by Indrajit. I can also make it comment if I save this thing, right? And if I refresh, it will remove. Yeah, it's like this. Okay, so this is a very simple application that you can develop, and if you want to write this application by yourself, that is also fine. Okay, so means this application is working fine. Now what is our next step? We need to make sure, we need to containerize this application. So whatever we are testing in here locally, how this application is tested, so it is tested with the three things. The developer, I have to install Python in my laptop. Okay, then I also have to install the pip, then I have to basically install all the requirements. So if you notice, we have a requirements.txt here, and we have some basically flex and request. So whenever you're creating an application in Python, let me explain this. This is a very important thing. So after understanding this concept, you will able to containerize any Python based application. So whenever you containerized or you have the Python based application, okay, you are saying you basically importing multiple modules. Now what is modules? It's increasing the helping a lot of things. Like modules are basically for example, somebody write a code. Okay, somebody have the code, and this is like flex, they wrote a flex framework, this called a module. Okay, so I am saying I don't have to write entire line of code from the scratch. I just want to import in my code. Okay, so I'm importing flex, means I don't have to write from the scratch. I just need that flex libraries. Okay, modules. So whenever the application is designed for Python, or Python application is designed, you will have a lot of libraries imported. Okay, not only just flex, some whenever you are creating a big project, you are importing multiple modules to increase the functionality of the code, right? So now you have tested in your local environment, right? You may be installed one by one. Like suppose you have flex application for this one, flex. You also have request modules. Locally I can try to install like this. For example, if I have to install, I can simply install with like flex, right? That will also install. But suppose if I have to deliver this application to client, this is not a right practice to install one by one packages. So what developer is saying, I will write every dependency packages into the requirement.txt. So you just have to run pip install -r and requirement.txt. So whenever you are doing this thing, it will install all the dependency which is related to this project. So that is basically whenever the application design in Python, you have the requirement.txt. If it is not, then you have to ask developer to write that thing. Okay. Now if I go back, I already have this thing. So let's suppose I have to install this thing. I can simply basically say pip install -r requirement.txt, and this will install everything. I already have that. Now what is the next step? So means our application is working fine. Now we need to containerize this application, means we have to test this application in the container. First of all, we need to create a, here in the same project we will create one folder called docker file. Okay, and here we will write everything that we have done in locally also. So I'm going to open a notepad. As a developer, what he did, he installed a Python locally. Okay, then he installed the pip, then he installed the requirements, and then he run this application with python app.py. So we will do the same thing in the actual docker file also when creating. So what is a docker file? Again, I'm coming back with the understanding more. So already have explained this thing in another. I have one like basically, if I go back to my repo, I created one repo for Docker understanding. I can also put this link in a description. I have everything related to that and what is Docker, how that Docker is created. So Docker is basically providing a containerization environment. So it is isolated containers. Okay. So with the Docker file, you will build a Docker image and then you will create a container. So our application will run in the container, but what is the image? It's a blueprint of the Docker container. Okay. So this is a main file which is should be there. If it is not there, then your basically pipeline will not trigger and will not able to create a containers also. So let's understand what is a Docker file. So let's say you have you have created Docker file, right? So with the Docker file, first it will start with the base image. Now base image is your main image where your all the stages will installed. Now what is a stages? Stages are nothing, is just your commands that you are writing. It may be a multi-stage also, but I'm not cover the multi-stage right now. Single stage it is fine, but with what is a base image? It will create an environment. So suppose you are choosing a base image as Ubuntu. Okay, so when you create a container, this is a container where your application will run, and this is a Docker file. Okay, so when you choose a base image, it is basically same that environment will set up in your container. So if my base image is Ubuntu, then in containers I will have the Ubuntu image, and I all the binaries for the Ubuntu it will install in my container. Okay, so for this application, do I really need a Ubuntu? The answer is no, because my application will able to run without Ubuntu, right? I just need a Python environment. So instead of that, I will use a Python, and I will install the dependency packages. So in my this project, I will use a Python, and when I import that Python image, right, it will already have the pip installed. So if I used a Ubuntu instead of Python, I need to install the, if I use a Ubuntu, suppose I need to install the Python, and then I also install the pip. So I don't have to do one by one task. Instead of that, I will use a Python image, and then it all already have the pip, right? Later it also helpful for reducing the image size. Okay, so you have to make sure that you are using a correct image. Then later on I will install my dependency with the help of install the dependency. Okay, with the help of requirement.txt, because this is a Python based. When we have this basically all the dependency inside the container, then I will expose the port number. So in So make sure whenever you're creating a container, as your application will run in your container, okay, your application will run in a container, it will be isolated container. Okay, so if you want to expose to the outside of the world, outside of the container, then you need to use expose, and you have to expose your port where your application is running. Many people don't understand this expose, and while running the container, there is we use a port mapping, right? We use a bind. But if you're not defining the port expose, then your application will not able to expose from the container. So that is why dockers is a isolated container. You have to define based on your requirement. Okay, so I'm saying expose, then I will say run by python pip, like this. This is my environment. So whenever I have define everything in my docker file, so docker file, what it will done, 1 second. So once docker file is created, docker file will create image, and with the help of image I will able to run my application inside the container. So this is a way that we need to containerize the application. Okay, so let's quickly create a docker file for this application and let's test this. So I will first write the from, and when you want to choose a base image, you have to say from, I will say python. Now here you can also define the specific tag that you want. Now there are multiple tags is available for Python. So if I go back to my Docker Hub and I can search here the Python, and you will see this is an image which is officially provided by the Python. Now I can search specific tag that I needed. As you can also use a base image. Base image has a lot of binaries which will install automatically, but this does not require, right? So I can use a very minimalistic file. So for that I will use Alpine or Slim, you whatever you want to use. I will use Slim. I will copy the tag and write it here simply. Now I'm saying I will set a working directory. Now this entire code of my app, index, everything, I want to copy that in particular directory, right? So as I say, it will create an environment. Inside the environment I need to create one folder as name as app. Okay, so this app, this when you use a work directory, it not only create a app but it also redirect it inside the app. Okay, then I am saying I want to copy everything inside the app. Okay, so I will use copy dot and dot. So why I use dot instead of app? Because I am currently inside the app. As I say, I am using work directory. So when I am using work directory, it will create a directory and it will also redirect inside the directory. So I am currently in the app. Okay, then I'm saying I want to copy everything, my source code, everything inside this work directory. Okay, then I want to expose the 5000. Now why I expose this 5000? Because my application is running. If I go back to the app.py, my application is running in 5000. I can also change this port from here like 8000, but then I have to define here. Okay, so basically it depends on you. If you want to change the port, then you can change from application based and then you can define it. Then last thing I want to basically before exposing this port, right, I want to install all the dependency. So what I want to do, I want to run pip install, and here you can avoid, I don't want to do this thing, right? You can simply say pip install -r requirement.txt. It will install all the dependency. Then you can expose, right? Expose the port. Okay, and then the last step, we want to run the application. So for running the application, this is a command, and I will say cmd python app.py. Now many people also asked why I used separately like comma and then like that. I can also use like python app.py, right? In when you are writing a docker file, these are a binaries. Python is a binaries, and this application is also a binary. So I have to separately define this thing when I'm using a CMD. Okay. So this is fine. My Docker file is fine. Now how to run this application? I mean how to create a image. Let me 1 second. I will launch the terminal here, and simply I will use docker build -t, t for tag your image. Okay, so I'm currently want to tag as demo app, and then I will say v1, just for example. Now I will use a dot because this I'm in a current project, right? And the docker file inside that same project. So I will use, if I this docker file inside in somewhere, I can use -f, and then I can define where it is. Okay, so I will use dot. Okay, so it is saying there is nothing because I forget to save this file. Now if I run this command again, so it is saying docker is not running. So I need to run the docker first because I'm using Windows, and docker desktop should be running. So let me just turn it on. Okay, now my docker daemon is running, docker engine is running. Now it should work. So if I clear this terminal, now it start building. So what is happening is when it start building, it is pulling up the basically the image, alpine image, and then it will set the directory. Here you will see, and it start installing my requirement.txt. Okay, now it is exposing the port, and then it will build the image. So if I type docker images, now you will see, let me clear the terminal, demo app. Okay, so it created a one image with the name of demo app and v1. Now if I want to run this application, I need to create a container, as I say. So I will say run -d container. When you create a container, you can use -d for detaching mode. Then you have to define the port number. Now what is a port number? The application was running on 5000, but I need to bind the port with my host machine. So it will be like host port, then container port. Okay, so what is my host port? I can define whatever I want. For example, I want to say 8080 and 5000, and then I will say I want to say this application as demo app, and then I have to define my image name. Okay, so I'm saying demo app v1. So this is a container name, this is a image name. Okay, when I run this thing, and I will say docker ps for checking my containers, now it is running. You see that what we have set up in the docker file, it is as it is running. Okay, and it is exposing the port also. Now we should able to get this application running on 80 port, 8080, sorry. So if I go back, and if I try to refresh, this will not work. As I say, this container is running inside, I mean this 5000 is running inside on my container. If I want to expose, I have to bind my port with the container. Now you see this application is running fine with my application. Okay, so this is how we containerize this application. Now our next step is to basically create our first CI pipeline with the help of GitHub Actions. So now we will go back in the project right here, and here you will see actions. So when we click on actions, it will ask us to create the pipeline, right? You can build, test, and deploy your code with the help of GitHub Actions, and it is also some suggesting you can use by default, and how this is suggesting based on your source code. So it is a Python based application, that's why it is suggesting some by default template that you can use it. Okay, but we want to create from the scratch, so you can click on start set up a workflow, and then you can say commit changes, right? And I will pull this image, I will pull this basically git pull, and then we have GitHub, and Whenever you're creating a GitHub Actions pipeline, it will be in a hidden folder .github and /workflow. Inside there will be whatever you want to define, it will trigger it. Okay, so we have now this main.yaml where we will write every pipeline here. Okay, so let's start writing this thing from the scratch. So if I go back here in the pipeline, you will see first what we are doing. We are testing the application, and we will use a Python based Flake 8 to test our application for linting testing, for code quality checks, and also we will test for the syntax related error. Okay, then we are building the container. I mean, we will build the container, and we will push that container into the Docker hub, and then we will update the manifest file. So we need to do this thing in our GitHub Actions. So whenever you're writing a GitHub action, first you have to say your GitHub, I mean your pipeline name. So I will say build and I will say test and build, because we are not deploying in here. Then you have to say I'm using, if you notice, it is auto recommending, right? Why? Because I'm using a Copilot. So you can also use Copilot if you're new or if you want to write, because I used to use this AI tools for writing a codes also. So now what they are saying, right? I'm saying next step is we need to say whenever there is a changes in master node. Okay, here you can also say if somebody will pull the code, then this pipeline will trigger. But I want whenever there is changes in this master node, okay, while pushing the code in the master node, and here I have master. Okay, if I go back, this is a master. So whenever there is a changes in the master, my pipeline should trigger. And also I have to say, I can also say where, I mean, I want to make sure whenever there is a changes in anywhere in this code, okay, not only the specific, but in anywhere. So I can say star star slash star. This will make sure that if anything changes in the code, it will basically run this pipeline. Now what pipeline will run? It will run the jobs. Okay, so what I'm saying whenever there is a changes in the master node, my jobs will run. Okay, inside the jobs, what jobs should be run, and where this job will run, it will run on the runners, right? First of all, I will say this is my build stage. So this should be runs on Ubuntu. Now if you notice that whenever we are creating a pipelines, our pipelines is running on some particular machines, right? VMs. If you're creating a Jenkins, so your Jenkins pipelines is running on like a worker nodes or like Docker, or maybe you're running on a master node itself, right? So in a similar way, whenever you're creating a GitHub Actions, so your pipeline is running in the VMs also. So as I say runs on, it means a runner is your where your jobs will run. Okay, so here later on I can say this will run as steps. Okay, now here I can use whatever I want. Okay, so what I can say name. Now here I can define multiple steps I want to trigger it. Okay, so first step is always like checkout code, and this checkout code is basically it will check out and pull your source code in this Ubuntu machine. Okay, then next step I want to set some machines, because I'm using I want to use a Docker. Also I want to use a testing for purpose. I want to set up the Python also. Okay, so what I will say name setup Python. Okay, so this will basically set up my Python, and here I will say 9 because I want to use 9. Okay, so we are these steps. Let me also put the comments. Setting up environment. Okay, now I also want to set up the Docker setup. Okay, so for Docker setup you just simply say Docker setup build text. Now if you notice that I'm using v2 v1, sometimes it is recommending v1, right? So this is a version which you can go to the Docker hub itself and you will say there are maybe a more new versions. Okay, so for now I'm using a v2 as for Docker. And then I will also say it for testing. Now my Docker is installed, right? I can do one thing, I can set up my credentials also, then I can do the testing, but it does not require for testing because first I can test, then I can set up the Docker. So I will do the testing first. So I'm saying uh, testing my code. Here I will say name. Okay, install a dependency. So what will happen is pip install. I'm saying now you may notice that I'm installing pip also, python-m pip install, right? If as I explain this thing while I'm creating a Docker file, if I am using a Python based image as a base image, then I don't have to install pip, right? But why I'm using Ubuntu here, if I go back, if I go back here, why I'm using Ubuntu, because I have to run multiple tasks based on Docker. I have to install Python also, Docker related task also. I have to use like a Linux shell scripting for updating the manifest files, right? So instead of using Python, I have to make an environment which is can be set up for multiple tasks. So Ubuntu is like you have like a kind of OS, right? Operating system, and you have all the dependency already installed. It may be a very big, but it does not, it will automatically destroy whenever the pipeline is trigger failed. Okay, now when you are installing using a Ubuntu, you have to install pip first. Okay, that's why then you can run the pip commands. Okay, so I'm saying python-m pip install upgrade pip. Then I'm saying install the requirements. However, it is not required because it will required when I'm building the image. Okay, but that is fine, it does not fails. Then I'm saying pip install, I want to install one module which called flex8. Okay, what this flex8 is basically, it will install, it will use for testing purpose. So I'm saying I have done this thing. Now I'm saying 1 second, this is under the environment setup, and here I will say test the code. Okay, run linting testing, I will say linting. So linting means, it maybe you, if you're a developer, you may know about this. Linting is basically code quality checks and syntax related error. So I will say pip run the linting testing, then I will use run hyphen using a pipe symbol. So when you use a pipe symbol, you can run multiple commands after that. Okay, so I'm using a pipe, then I will have to make a one space, and then I will say flake 8 and use this thing. Now ignore this, basically this is a spaces between, if it will ignore the spaces if it is not relevant, so you can forget about this thing. Okay, simply say pip flake 8 and dot, means it will check all the Python based application and in my current directory, and it will test the testing based on like syntax related error or code quality checks. Okay, then I have to say I need to set up my Docker credentials. Okay, credentials. So I will use uses Docker login, and then I will say registry. Okay, I don't require this for now, and I will say username and password. Now why I'm using this thing, I can also say like my username is infosexing, right? And I can also paste the password here, but this is not a right way. It will leak your password if you're putting in a YAML file. Okay, because if you are push this code into the basically into a GitHub, anyone is using your repo as a publicly, it will basically use your credentials, and it can be very like a worst condition. Okay, so right way is to use a secrets. So GitHub is providing a secrets, as I say, and I will say GitHub secrets secrets, and then I will say, let's say I will say docker username, and then I will say docker password. Okay, now here I put this thing, but where I have these environment variables, right? I haven't created any environment variable. So what I need to do, I need to go back to my docker. Then I have, one second, then I have to click on settings, account and settings, and you will see the PAT. PAT is a personal access token. When you click on this, you can generate a new token if you don't have. So I will say GitHub action token. Then expiry date you can put as none whenever you are using a triggering it any pipelines. Okay, so then you will have permission. So choose a read and write permission and generate it. Okay, now go back to the GitHub account and then click on settings. For the same repo, click on settings and then click on scroll down and click on secrets and variables, click on actions, and here you can set the variables. Okay, so I'm saying my new repo is docker password and put this thing, and then I will also say docker username, and here I will say my username is, what is my username? So I will copy this username and I will add this thing. So we have our variables here, and this will use automatically whenever I'm triggering this thing. So this $sign, it's basically referring as I have basically variables. Okay, now what is the next step? Suppose I have tested the application, it is fine. Next step, we are basically we have tested the application, it is fine. Now our next step is to build the application, right? So I'm saying build the Docker image. So I'm saying name as build Docker image, then I will say run. Okay, oops, sorry, run doc, and I will say docker build hyphen dot t, and I will say my username. So whenever you are building when you want to push this image into the Docker hub, so the way you are doing is you have to tag your image with your username also. So you need to say username, okay, and then you have to say your application name. For example, I'm saying demo app, and then you can say your tag. Okay, now here you see as if I go back to my architecture here, so you may see that whenever our pipeline is getting triggered here, okay, so it should update a new tag. For example, one second, for example, at the first step, first time whenever there is a pipeline triggered, at that time it was v1 tag for the image tag. Okay, next time it should build the image and tag it as v2. So means we need to create a mechanism which automatically make a tag before building the image, then we can push to the Docker hub, right? So what we can say, if whenever the pipeline is getting triggered here, right, at that time the time, I mean date and time will be a different all the time, right? If it is triggered, this pipeline was triggered at 2 p.m. and this pipeline was triggered on 3 p.m, right? So it will automatically tag that thing, right? It will be a different time. So if we say, why not we can create a one variable, say a equal to variable for example, I'm saying v, and I'm saying date. Okay, so whenever the pipeline will trigger, and I can use this variable using a tag, right? So whenever that pipeline will trigger, this date will be a different always, and it will use that as a tag. Okay, and whenever the new tag will update it, I can also update in the manifest file here. So let's go back to the pipeline here. Before build this image, so I will create a tag again, docker tag, and I will say my id equal to version, and then I will say run command. Then here I will say I will create a one variable with v dollar and date. Okay, and I will save this thing. Now why I'm getting this error? Okay, so now it is fine. We will see. So we have created our environment and we store in the GitHub environment. Okay, GitHub environment. So we can use this during the tag. So we can use like environment dot and version like this. Okay, so this is like that. So let's tag this thing that we have built. So we will say whenever the image will build, we will use as first we will use dollar sign. Okay, and then we will say environment dot version. Okay, like that. So next step, we need to push this thing into the Docker hub. So we will say the same thing, push, and like that. So we have done this thing, right? Till now we are saying we have built and deployed. So let's see if our pipeline will work and able to push into the Docker hub. Okay, so I'm saying git add as created our first pipeline, and then I will push this code. When something is getting pushed, it will trigger my pipeline as I mentioned in above here. Okay, here. So let's see if our pipeline is getting triggered or not. So if I go back to the action, now you see that created first pipeline. Okay, I can click on build and you may see, you can monitor also. So if you see first is set up the job. Okay, in the job there is image for the Ubuntu, and then it later on it's install the Flake application. I mean it set up the Docker also, then set up the Python, install that all the things, right? It's set up the new version. So when the new version is set up, there will be a new date, you see, and then later on it should get pushed to the Docker hub. Okay, then later on it clear every jobs and it stopped the my pipeline. I mean it's successfully completed. Now you see demo app is there with the new tag. Okay, means we have done so far so everything. Now what is the next step? Whenever there is a if I go back here, now next step we need to update the manifest file. Okay, so we can also do in this here, we can say so we will say manifest file update the Kubernetes manifest file. Okay, files. Now it is auto recommending, so I'm using that and I will do the editing. So update the manifest file using a set command, so we don't have to update anything into the basically we just have to update. So now if you notice what we are doing, we are updating the manifest file. So I already have this deployment. I created the one repo in deploy, and there we have deploy YAML and SCV YAML. So deployment is basically your main where the pod will run. Okay, and here you will see we have tag name. So what we need to do, whenever there is a new tag updated, we need to update this new tag here so that it will sync up automatically. So when the new tag will here, it will be a new image tag, right? So means the application should be refreshed. So what we need to do, we will use a sed command to replace this older tag with a new tag. So how we can use this thing? So we will go back to this main.yaml, and we will say sed -i for replacing it, s for searching it. Okay, so I'm saying image, so AR does not mention image, so I can remove this thing because this is incorrect. So I go back here, I will say go to that uh, deploy, and I will search for this thing image infosec, and instead of tag name I just use star. Okay, here. So then I will say replace with this. Again I will make this thing similar and replace with the help of environment. Okay, and this should be replaced, this is under my deploy and deploy. Okay, so it will update this thing, as this will be updated in the Ubuntu machine. You see here Ubuntu, I want this Ubuntu machine can trigger and update my GitHub also, because if I do not update this thing on a GitHub also, I mean I do not update this thing, then it will not able to trigger and it will not update that. So what I need to do, I am saying I want to update GitHub, right? So I can say git changes. First I can put anything here, so I don't want to put my email address, so I will say GitHub, and instead of this I can say GitHub Actions bot. You can type anything. Okay, then you're saying I'm whenever this will trigger, I want to add, and then I will say commit with the new changes with new version tag, and I will put that tag. Okay, this is fine. Then I need to push to the origin master. That's it. Now this is completely completed my GitHub action pipeline. Before this thing, as this is Ubuntu machine, okay, and if I want to trigger any GitHub, I want to push this command, making sure your repo should have the permission. So if I click on this action in the same repo, click on the settings and then click on actions, click on generals, scroll down, and you will see workflow permissions. Currently it sets as read repo. This is a by default, but if you want to trigger something, right, then you can select as read and write permission and then save it. Okay, now we will try to push this. We will see if our pipeline is getting pushed, and this new stages we have added, it is getting pushed. So we will add, and let's say changes in manifest, and then I will push. All right, so we have pushed this thing. Let's see the pipeline main and see if we are able to make things work like that. Okay, it is downloading. Testing also completed, and I'm waiting for this step where basically it's updating the manifest. Oh, something, we have some error related to that. So what is the error? Process completed with one error. So I did one mistake. Sometime it has happened. I have to use this instead of single quotes. Okay, so I use this, and here I have to use pipe symbol, and then I need to use also here pipe symbol, and I will use this pipe symbol and G. Okay, then let me save this thing and let's see if that will work or not. So add, commit, and push. Okay, my another pipeline get triggered. So let's go back to the actions and see if at this time it will work. Okay, so now it's working fine. Now my pipeline is triggered and updated, and here if I show you that it updated my manifest files also. Okay, So it updated with the new version. So I'm expecting that it should be fine. If I go back, and you will see it updated with the help of GitHub Action Board, not with my, because I'm using that environment here. You see GitHub Action Board using none. This is a none information that I don't want to put an email. Okay, so if I click on deploy, I will have the new tag here. Oops, something, 1 second, tag, did I mistake? All right, so there was some changes again in this code. The set command was not able to update it. So the mistake I did, actually I put the different name in here and then it was getting failed. Okay, so here I did the changes. What I did the changes, I'm making sure I will use a cat command to read the file again. Okay, and but before that I will use this correct tag. Okay, the demo app and like that. Okay, here also I am going to update my email address. Does not required, but let's say maybe it is happening. And also I set the remote set URL here. Okay, and I will push this thing. So I'm going to say git add, and I will say commit changes in set command, and then I will push this thing. Now let's see if this is working fine. All right, let's see. I'm waiting for that. It will update the new tag. If it will update the new tag, it will be next step will be deploying on Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so let's see. It's okay. Now here it start updating. So we have new tag. Yes, so previously I think it will be updated. My pipeline is triggered with a new tag. And now let's see if my new to tag has been updated here. I'm not sure, but let's see. Yeah, so it is updated now. So the set command was wrong. I did the changes here. New tag has been updated. All right, so our pipeline is completely fine. Now what I can do is set up our Kubernetes cluster with ArgoCD. So we have done so far manifest file. What will happen whenever there is a new changes, ArgoCD will look for the new changes and will roll out the new features here. Okay, so let's see. If you don't know how to do this thing, I have already written down all the steps here. Okay, like set up the ArgoCD in the Minikube. And if you want to use EC2 instances, the steps are same. Okay, the only difference is the Minikube instructions I do not have provided, because there are new versions released for the Minikube. Then you need to look for the website. So you can simply go to the Minikube if you want to set up based on your requirements. Like if you have 2 GB CPU, RAM and 20 GB space free disk available, then you can simply open a PowerShell, run these two commands, and that's all you needed. Okay, later on you can follow this step. All right, so what we can do is open our CMD, and I can simply say Minikube as I already have that, and I will say status. Let me see if it is working. Okay, it is not. So I will say start, and I have to open as CMD as run as administrator for starting this thing. So 1 second, it will failed. That is fine, and making sure it is not running. So I will shut down this thing, because sometimes it's happening when you're not turning this thing on with the help of administrator, it will not work. Okay, so I just turn it off back, and I will turn it back on with the administrator. Now you see it started, and here also it started. It takes 1 or 2 minutes, and during this thing, if you have any doubts how this thing we are using it, if you have any related to the doubt, you can comment below and I will try to answer it. But one thing you can do is, when you are doing fork of this request of this repo, when you're doing the fork, right? Making sure do not simply deploy directly, right? You can delete this Docker file, you can delete the this basically pipeline, okay, and then you can create by yourself. This will help you to create, right? Otherwise you will not able to understand how things work. So that is the thing, making sure this should be fine. Now let's see if our minikube is working fine. So it is starting and it takes some time, so please bear with me. Okay, so let's see if minikube is started. Minikube status, yeah, so it is running. So we will basically copy this command, okay, and this will create a ArgoCD operator inside the minikube. So this will basically takes a few minutes. So you can, once you run this thing, you can say Kubernetes, and this command is also available. So you just have to copy and paste. And I will just copy and paste because you people are saying that it is not working on my system, right? So like that. Okay, so it is still running. So everything is running fine now. Now what we need to do is, as ArgoCD is by default set as cluster IP. So if I say kubectl sa v-argocd, you will see that ArgoCD server, which is we are going to access, it is by default as a cluster IP. So we need to access this server. So we will change this as node port. So there is a simple command that you can run to patch this thing. I'm going to use copy paste simply, right? And if I just copy run this thing, it is now as node port. uh, okay, so I will start this minikube service as then I can able to access this ArgoCD with the URL. So it is giving me the URLs. I can simply copy, okay, and then I can open this in my terminal. All right, now you will see my minikube has been working. Now for login into the minikube, the username is admin, and for access this password, you can copy this command and paste into the git terminal, because okay, so I'll copy this uh, secret, and I will paste inside this password. ArgoCD is set up properly. Now what we need to do next is, if I go back here, we need to set up a continuous deployment pipeline to whenever there is a changes in the manifest file, it will automatically trigger and will deploy my cluster application inside the cluster. So here if I click on new application, I can simply say demo app, let's say demo app, then project name as default, set sync up policy. So this is a very important. If you set as manual, then you need to click on sync button whenever there is a new changes, but I want it automatically sync whenever there is a new changes. Okay, so I also will select self healing option. So if my port will crash, it will automatically recreate it. Okay, then I have to say, if I scroll down, I need to set the repo here. So which this is a GitOps approach, that this will basically look for my repo. So I will copy this thing and I will go back and set as git, because this is a git. Okay, you can also set the during with the helm, but this is git. Now make it as head. And where is my deployment file? So if I go back above, my deployment file inside the deploy, right? So what I can say, I can simply go and say deploy the path. Inside the deploy, I have the services and deployments, and where I want to deploy this cluster. And you can set multiple cluster also. I just want to make sure this is running locally, so I am saying the cluster IP is local default CSV. Okay, now namespace, if you have specific namespace of your application, then you can put that, but if you don't have, then you have to put default. If you're not putting this thing, you will get an error. Okay, so I'm setting this as default, and then I simply have to click on create. Okay, so let's wait for to make this thing work. And this is synced properly, means this is able to pull the information, and now it is processing. Now if I click on this, you will see it is synced, and it able to sync deployment and services, and it has a deployment, and you will see deployment app services, and it created the application as node port. Okay, so if I go back to my terminal, if I just click on search for kubectl get po, I mean ports, you will see that my demo application has been deployed successfully. Okay, another thing, if I want to access this application, I can simply again say minikube services and list. You will see the IP which we can use it. Okay, so now you see my deploy demo apps services is running on this particular port number. So I will copy and I will try to access. Now you see we have successfully deployed in Kubernetes cluster with the help of ArgoCD. Now what is the use of this ArgoCD? Suppose if there is I'm trying to do the changes manually in the deployment from here. I'm inside the cluster with the help of cluster. Suppose I do the changes inside. Okay, I will say edit and copy. I will say deploy. Okay, so I will try to do some changes. Suppose if there is a malicious something is happening, right? Somebody is trying to do the changes here. I will try to change the image name. Okay, so for example, I will say as this is latest, something like that. Okay, I will save this thing and I will close. Now is edit. Now I should expect the Argo CD will look the changes. Okay, so you notice that the Argo CD automatically changed the tag for that. Okay, inside the, so why this is here, you can see I put as latest, right? But it is automatically changed the tag. This is how is happening. Argo CD is always looking for your application. If something is getting changed by cluster, by somebody is doing that, Argo CD will say, hey, this is not the same like what is I am checking on this here in GitOps, right? So git repo, so he will say that I want to sync back again, as this is not a right tag image, and this should be synced again, which should be like basically should be the same as the GitOps. Okay, so now we have successfully deployed. Now whatever the changes I'm doing in my source code as a developer, let's say I'm a developer and I'm doing the changes in my application. For example, I will remove this developed by Indrajit. Okay, so I will make it as comment and I will save this thing. So whenever there is a changes, like I will say did changes for testing, and then I will say push. Whenever I'm doing the changes in the master branch, okay, first I need to pull. The reason is because there is a new changes in the deployment tag. Okay, so I will say okay, now I can able to push. Now I am able to push. Okay, now we have pushed this image. Now I'm expecting this should be changed. How this will happen? It will first trigger my pipeline here in the action pipeline as merged branch. Okay, then later on, once this pipeline will be finished, my new image tag will be available in the image tag, and then my Argo CD will look for the new changes and will update my application here. Okay, right now it is not done because my pipeline is still working, so let's wait for that. It is completed almost, and if I just refresh, not yet. So let's refresh this. Okay, so my application is demo, and for there we should received sync status. Okay, now you see that it is automatically synced. Okay, if I go back, it's now getting processed. It is automatically. So still my application is working fine, but what is happening when there is a new changes, it automatically synced and deployed in a new port. Now my new changes has been done. So this is how actually CI/CD pipeline is working. So whenever there is a new changes, application team can deploy and test in the development environment, and making sure this environment, this continuous integrity is more important than continuous deployment. The reason is you can integrate more tools here to test for making sure your main artifact that it is secure and deployed properly. You can integrate more tools, like you can integrate Travis for scanning your Docker images and do a lot of things. But later on, when the artifact is available, it is a final stage, then deployment pipeline will trigger. And in deployment pipeline you will have multiple deployment pipelines. Okay, for example, one second. For example, once the integration pipeline is done, then you can integrate three stages also. For example, you can say dev environment, then you can say I want to make a QA environment. In people also saying like staging environment. So QA environment, basically once the deployment pipeline is I mean you have developer has been tested everything in dev environment, then QA environment will trigger. Then if everything is fine in the QA environment also, then you can create a production environment. So QA engineers are basically using a QA environment, staging environment, for testing the functionality of the application, all the features, if it is working fine or not. If it is fine, then it will deploy in a production environment. The first step is always like a dev environment, and these two pipelines can be triggered manually and automatically also. So, but this basically we used to do in automation, because whenever developer is writing a changes, he needs to check if it is working fine or not. So I hope this tutorial is helpful for you to understand the entire complete CI/CD pipeline, as how DevOps engineers writing a pipelines in actual environment, and this might can also be helpful when you want to create a project also. I will basically provide this entire code in the description also, and you can try to test in your local environment. And if you have any doubts, you can comment below, and I will try to answer in 1 or 2 hours. Okay, and one thing guys, if you're successfully deploy this app entire project, please put that on LinkedIn also, that we have successfully deployed. You can tag me also if you want, and I will try to comment below also there. So this will definitely will make you a lot of understanding, like and can be a lot of questions also in the interview. And if you really like, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. Thank you so much.